There was a monumental opinion written by the Supreme Court of the United States earlier this week, and I think a lot of people kind of missed it. I'm joined by Laura Loomer and Larry Klayman. Laura, Larry, welcome to the show. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
L&L, you've heard of M&M, it's L&L.
Yeah.
That's right. LL and L. So what's going on with this Supreme Court case? This was a big disappointment because it had a lot to do with both of you, yet almost no mention at all.
Well, we got mentioned by our docket number, right? Our gulag prisoner numbers. That's what we mentioned by now. We don't have names in the simulation in Joe Biden's America. In Joe Biden's America, you're referenced by your docket numbers. So that's why a lot of people didn't see this. But of course, yesterday, it was announced that, well, the Supreme Court is now back in session, of course. And so we had this case that we originally filed in 2018 against Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Apple. And it was an antitrust lawsuit. And ultimately, it went to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. It was dismissed. And then we petitioned for it to be heard in the Supreme Court. And it was rescheduled for distribution of conference 5 times, which, was kind of unprecedented and unheard of. And we were wondering, Larry and I were scratching our heads wondering why our case was being rescheduled so many times. Well, there was another case that was a petition for review in the Supreme Court regarding a lawsuit filed against President Trump for blocking people on Twitter. And so Larry had told me that he thought that the reason why our case was being rescheduled so many times is that they were doing something, and they did. They denied our case, but Justice Thomas, as we saw, decided to bundle in his opinion about the 2 social media cases that were positioned before the court for review. The statement that he made, in which he said that the court is going to be forced at some time in the near future to address these issues, was in response to our case, which he mentioned, of course, by the docket number. You can see his statement. You go to Loomer.com. You can see the new statement that he just issued.
Well, there's some humor in this. They didn't really want to use our names because Laura and I are very strong advocates. We're radioactive. I mean, we've been critical of the Supreme Court. But they actually, if you read Justice Thomas's decision, it's more about our case than it is about Trump's case. Trump's case was actually kind of stupid. It wasn't Trump who brought it. It was these leftists that brought it, that claimed that because he had, taken people off of his Twitter page or whatever you call it, that somehow he denied people the right to be in a public forum because he's the president of the United States. And the Supreme Court, in disposing of that, they took the certiorari, they dismissed that case. They said, well, Trump's no longer president, so it's moot. I mean, that was a cop-out. On the other hand, Thomas talks about our lawsuit, but he never uses our name. And that's what's really funny, and that's why Laura says, yeah, we're known by docket numbers. So this is typical of the politics in Washington, D.C. They're little sissies up there, even on the Supreme Court. They obviously have a hard time dealing with Laura and me because we hold their feet to the fire. And except for Justice Thomas, the rest of them are totally corrupt up there. So this is what you're dealing with. Now, Thomas made a ruling here, which was very important. He said, yes, there is potential antitrust liability here. We brought a case under the antitrust laws. As you know, Jason, I'm an antitrust lawyer, among other things, and I helped break up AT&T. And Thomas also talked about the AT&T case. He said, well, we can't reach it now, which was a cop-out. But he said, someday we're going to have to deal with it because of the superior market power of these big tech companies, Apple, Google, YouTube, the rest of them. And then he threw it over to regulatory agencies to say, well, you can regulate this like a public carrier. And that was what happened with AT&T. And of course, it didn't work with AT&T because they violated every norm of regulation. Nobody could figure out what their tariffs were, what their rates were. So we threw up our hands at the Justice Department when I was there, and we said, well, we're just going to sue them and break them up. So it's kind of a circular reasoning. So although we're appreciative of Thomas writing this decision and saying, yes, this is a legitimate issue, he copped out as much as the other justices. That's the bottom line.
And I posted on Parler. I'm on Parler and I'm on Gab and Telegram at Laura Loomer. And then my Telegram is Loomer Official. And I just posted, reposted the article. So yeah, you have it up on your screen right there, but people can go and they can see it there at loomer.com, and then they can read the statement. But if you go to the front page and you click home, Jason, because you're looking, that's the older update. If you go down and you scroll down a bit, that one right there, the picture of me and Justice Thomas, you can actually see what Larry's talking about, and that the statement that's going viral in which he's talking about how this is unprecedented censorship wasn't in response to the case brought against Trump, but it was actually in response to our case. And so you can see it says, while this case involves a suit against a public official, he's talking about this case against Trump, the court properly rejects a separate petition alleging that digital platforms, not individual on those platforms, and of course they're talking about Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Apple, who we sued, violated public accommodation laws, the First Amendment, and antitrust laws. Docket number 20969. The petitions highlight two important facts. Today's digital platforms provide avenues for historically unprecedented amounts of speech, including speech by government actors. Also unprecedented, however, is the concentrated control of so much speech in the hands of a few private parties. We will soon have no choice but to address how our legal doctrines apply to highly concentrated, privately owned information infrastructure such as digital platforms. So that was clearly in response to our case, and it was so funny when this happened. Larry and I were scanning the documents looking for a mention of Freedom Watch or Larry Klayman or Laura Loomer, and there was nothing there. And then we thought, oh, okay, well, I guess there was no mention of our case. And then I said, oh wait, no, we are now mentioned as our prisoner number, Larry. So
well, maybe you should have done a meme that had Laura on Justice Thomas's lap like Mandingo or something like that. Because...
Well, Larry, you had mentioned this whole controversy with the can of Coke that came up when Clarence Thomas was being, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Certified. And he's certainly kicking the can down the road with this opinion, isn't he?
So to speak, yeah. Well, I really like Justice Thomas. He's the one judge up there with integrity, frankly. And I know him. I've known him way back when. I'll tell you a little anecdote, a funny story. When I became known, I may have told this before on your show, Jason, so forgive me. But when I triggered the Chinagate scandal back in the late 90s, all of a sudden I came onto people's radar, and I was invited to the home of Barbara and Ted Olson, very Republican people. Ted Olson was Solicitor General later. Barbara Olson was an activist. She sadly died in 9/11. One of the planes that took off from Dulles crashed into the Pentagon, and she was on it. But anyway, I went to that party that they had. They invited me. They didn't know who I was, really, at that time. I was an international trade lawyer and litigator. And I walk in, and there's Justice Thomas on the other side of the room. So I walk over to him, and I said, Justice Thomas, I'm Larry Klayman. I'm really honored to meet you. And he said, Larry, I'm honored to meet you. I said, why is that? He said, because I wish I was doing what you were doing. I said, you've got a pretty good job, Justice Thomas. You're Supreme Court Justice. And he says, it was better when I was a justice on the D.C. Circuit, the appeals court. I could go to Union Station every day, get French fries, eat the French fries, take my time. He says, now at the Supreme Court, all I do is push paper. He's got a very good sense of humor. And years later, I was at an event with him, and I remember him getting up. It was given by the Free Congress Foundation, which used to evaluate judges, for appointment. The conservative icon Paul Weyrich ran that, and later my friend and colleague Mike Pendleton, who became Judicial Watch's Western Regional Director at the time. And he got up and he said, if you stand for anything, and this is, a lesson, and something that Laura lives by and I live by and you live by, you have to be prepared to get cut in Washington. You have to be able to take the heat. And the poor guy for many years was so traumatized by what Joe Biden tried to do to him. And Biden was head of the Judiciary Committee, despicable, dishonest. They set him up with Anita Hill, and as he put it, it was a legal lynching. And they made this stuff up. He made some comment about a hair that was on a Coke can, and he hung allegedly a centerfold of Playboy magazine in his kitchen, and that was the basis to say that he had sexually harassed Anita Hill. Despicable. So this was the beginning of what you saw with Kavanaugh and with others,
right,
in terms of the assassination. But he weathered it, and he's come out of that, and he's become the most vocal of the conservatives. He's the only real conservative on the court. The rest of them are a bunch of phonies. They pretended they were conservatives to get there, and then once they got there, like chameleons, they changed stripes. They're like Zelig. But he's a real conservative.
He's been outspoken about the issue too, and our case was not about Section 230. So I think it's important to note that he brought up several points in his statement, but we did not mention Section 230 in our lawsuit at all, actually. And so his argument, the part of his argument that has gone viral that they're focusing on, his quote, is actually the quote in response to our case, as Larry stated. So. But of course, the media, they don't want to talk about that.
No.
Well, all of the legal publications, Law 360, Law and Crime, which is a real rag of Dan Abrams, his dad is Floyd Abrams, very leftist, MSNBC, and other publications, National Law Journal, they're all far left. So they'll never give a conservative any credit for doing anything. So obviously, they didn't really mention Laura and me. But even Justice Thomas, I suspect he probably wanted to, but the other justices on the Supreme Court told him just to refer to us by our docket number. So that's who we are. And Laura has an idea about that. Tell us what it is.
Well, I had this idea because we all know that the favored tactic of communists and Nazis is censorship, of course. And when I handcuffed myself to Twitter, as you know, Jason, I wore a yellow star. Because I really do believe that what we're seeing right now, it's massive digital extermination, which is a precursor to actual extermination. And I do believe that history is going to repeat itself, and we're going to find ourselves with concentration camps again. And we are living in a digital gulag. And just like gulag prisoners and prisoners in concentration camps had to have tattoos, right? The Nazi style Holocaust tattoos. I thought that it would be really symbolic to actually get my docket number tattooed on my wrist, like a Holocaust style tattoo, because I really do believe that history is repeating itself, and we are witnessing a digital Shoah, and this is digital extermination by these actual fascists and tyrants in Silicon Valley, and so I might just get my docket number tattooed on my wrist.
Laura raises a point. I wrote a column yesterday. You can find it at freedomwatchusa.org. It's called Biden, Harris, and the Fourth Reich. And the big tech is just part of this Fourth Reich, because if you look at what's happening in society, you've got major corporations that are throwing their lot with radical leftists, Biden and Harris, really killing free speech as well, moving the All-Star game from Atlanta to Colorado, even though Colorado has more restrictive voting laws than even Georgia. But of course, if you're from the South, you're automatically a white nationalist or white racist. That's what they'll call you, just like they've called Laura that and me that and everybody else that. And she's from the South now. She's from Florida. I went to Duke and Emory. Then you've got labor unions, large law firms, bar associations like the District of Columbia Bar, just a vile bar that's trying to eliminate conservative lawyers. You've got people in all walks of life throwing in the towel and getting down and begging forgiveness because sometime in the past, whites were responsible, quote unquote, for slavery. Whites have become the new Jews in this country. We've become the scapegoats, just like Hitler made them the scapegoats. And now you've got the FBI being used as a Gestapo to hunt anyone down that was in Washington on January 6th in support of the president, including those who walked into the Capitol peacefully. You've got 20,000 troops in Washington, D.C., because Biden and Harris think they're going to be overthrown. So you're dealing here with a situation which is very similar to what we saw in Nazi Germany. So Laura's analogy is very apt. In Nazi Germany, people were in denial. Jews were in denial. They thought, oh, we're Germans. No one will do it to us. Well, they wound up in gas chambers and ovens. Conservatives in this country and people of faith and those who believe in the vision of our founding fathers, we're destined, I believe, for a similar fate, but they're doing it more slowly right now. And all of these forces are throwing their weight behind what they perceive to be the winner, all these corporations, labor unions, big tech, because Biden and Harris can scratch their backs and make them more money. And that's what it's all about. And I'm really disgusted, at Coca-Cola, which owns Emory University, where I went to law school. And I'm disgusted at Delta, which is also in Atlanta. Atlanta's a great city. And these corporations are doing exactly what BMW, Mercedes, and Deutsche Bank, which financed the concentration camps, did in World War II. They're propping up the ultra left.
And that's exactly what happened. In order to break up these companies following the Holocaust and the Second World War, right? It was antitrust laws that were utilized to break them up. And so whenever you study the Holocaust and you do any type of investigation or historical analysis into Hitler or the Holocaust, the first thing that you come across, of course, is Nazi propaganda and censorship. And the first thing that Hitler did in 1933 was the book burnings. They closed down and they took over anti-Nazi newspapers. They shut down all foreign radio broadcasts. They started burning books. They created the Reich Ministry of Enlightenment and Propaganda with Joseph Goebbels, of course. And that's exactly what the Democrats are doing in this country. We're seeing modern day book burnings, but it's all digital, of course. Amazon is refusing to sell certain books. Publishers are canceling the books of conservatives. We're seeing this fake news propaganda to spread these radical ideas. And don't forget, Nazism is National Socialism. It's a leftist idea, okay? So these are leftists. And the Democrats, of course, under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, are using these authoritarian tactics. And in his own words, he's an authoritarian. He's a dictator. It's a dictatorship. It's like a Nazi dictatorship. Joe Biden said that dictators use executive orders. And Joe Biden, within his first 65 days in office, signs 37 executive orders, which is more than his last three predecessors combined in their first 100 days in office. And so Joe Biden is acting like an authoritarian. And it's why a lot of people are using Holocaust relativism to describe the new age that we're living in, because history is repeating itself and people are having their rights violated. And it's the type of propaganda and censorship and hatred and dehumanization and language that was used in the buildup to the Holocaust.
Well, that's right. And, you got to ask yourself this question, Jason. I pose this because I do a podcast every morning. I do a radio show. Laura's going to be on it this week on Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Also, a TV show I subbed for Alan Keyes on Thursday. She's going to be on that as well. Look for that, ILTV. But King George III was not a socialist. King George III was not a communist. King George III was not an atheist. King George III was not a radical Muslim. King George III was not a radical member of the Marxian Jewish left. And we're Jewish, so you can't say we're anti-Semitic. But the Jewish left is very destructive. Not most Jewish people. This is a minority. These are the disciples of Marx. And he wasn't a radical black. What we've got right now is someone in office who is much worse than King George III. And we fought a revolution beginning on July 4th, 1776, actually before Lexington and Concord, the violence broke out. And what caused that? Because King George III was overtaxing the colonies to pay for the rest of his empire. King George III took our legal system back to London, the criminal justice system. And he was issuing one edict after another for his yes men judges to rubber stamp. And then, last but not least, when hostilities broke out at Lexington, Concord, and New York, he tried to seize our guns. Sound familiar? This is where we are today.
Well, I had my gun rights taken. So, yeah, it's exactly what Hitler did. That's exactly what all these tyrants have done throughout history, is they silence you and then they take your guns away. And, of course, this happened prior to the Biden administration, but it goes to show you what happens when these big tech social media companies can influence people. And when you have, we basically have a Gestapo in the form of the FBI. Okay, so Hitler had his SS officers and he had the Gestapo, and that's what the Democrats have when they utilize the FBI as a propaganda arm. And I was red flagged by the FBI, and now I'm federally prohibited and banned from owning a gun. So I tried to get a concealed carry
no trial,
permit,
by the way.
denied.
No
It was
charge.
denied. And I'm not just denied from having a concealed carry permit. I'm denied from even possessing a gun. And the feds tried to set me up because I had a gun, okay? And no one told me that I was on this list. And the only reason I tried to get a concealed carry, you don't even need a concealed carry in the state of Florida unless you're going to carry your gun, is because I was getting death threats and I wanted to carry a gun to protect myself because a member of Rose City Antifa doxed me and sent me an email during my campaign saying that they knew where I lived and that if I didn't drop out of my race, they were going to find me and shoot me in my head. And so we sent that to the Portland Police Department, who reported it to the FBI. And also, too, I had like fatwas issued against me by Islamic terrorists. And, John Guandolo, of course, who's a former FBI special agent, told me that I should get a gun to protect myself because the threats from these Islamic terrorist organizations are credible and real.
So the FBI, hang on, stop.
Reported to the FBI, the red flag.
Ho. Wait. So the FBI tells you to get a gun, but the FBI has
working. John was not working for the FBI. He's a former FBI special agent.
He works for
but
Hilton
John
or
used
something
to be in
now.
charge of analyzing all of the threats on Capitol Hill against lawmakers. And so, through his contacts in counterterrorism, he received a credible threat that there was a fatwa issued against me. There were Muslim terrorists that were threatening to kill me, and they were plotting to kill me. And so, we reported it, and he had said that it's a very credible threat, and the first thing you need to do when you get back to Florida is to get a gun. So this was in 2018, by the way. And so I got a gun when I came back to Florida. I had no problem, getting the gun. So then when I tried to go get my concealed carry permit in 2019, I fill out the paperwork. And, John's a friend of mine, and he used to work for the FBI. Then my concealed carry permit is denied. And I try to find out why. And then they say, well, you have to fill out this paperwork. And then they say, if you think we made a mistake, you can resubmit your application. So I resubmit the application and I say, I think you made a mistake. They said, no, we didn't make a mistake. You can't have a concealed carry. Then I asked why. Well, people who are federally prohibited from having a firearm are not allowed to have concealed carry. Nobody ever told me, Jason. I would never have known that
but
I was
don't you need to commit a crime?
owning a firearm unless I applied for the concealed carry. And even then, like I told you, they didn't tell me why I couldn't have a concealed carry. I had to further, inquire. But that was I could have just accepted the first round and said, okay, well, I'm not going to get a concealed carry. So the feds could have easily doorstopped me like they did to all my friends and everyone I know before and after January 6th. And if they would have forcefully entered my home and searched my home, they would have found a firearm, and then I would be in prison right now on a federal firearms felony. But of course, when I found out that I was federally prohibited, I got rid of the gun because I don't want to be set up by the feds. And we know that the feds are dirty and they try to set people up. So this is what they're doing to people. And so I'm trying to fight this legally right now, but you can see what they do. It's entrapment is what it is. It's entrapment.
Justin Case says you may be able to purchase black powder guns, but that's not the issue. The issue is you're not a felon.
Any type of gun. I'm not even allowed to go to a firing range or a gun range or a gun show. And so since I'm federally prohibited from owning a gun, if I'm spotted at a gun show or a gun range, it would be considered evading the firearms ban or attempting to purchase a firearm, which would be punishable by prison time.
Larry, how can they do this? How can they violate Laura's constitutional rights like this?
So that's a particular example of the potential for violence here. This is a U.S. Congresswoman who decided that she'd assault Laura because she was asking tough questions about her policies on Israel.
Yeah, and this was even prior to her becoming a congresswoman, too. This was when she was at a campaign event with Ilhan Omar when they were just candidates for Congress. So, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because I actually found out that this terrorist threat against me happened while I was in Minneapolis investigating Ilhan Omar. So imagine that, right? And so these threats against my life are real, and I am a public figure, but above all else, I'm an American citizen, and I'm entitled to have my Second Amendment right. But especially since I'm a public figure who gets death threats, I should be able to have a concealed carry. I mean, they've cut off my revenue stream. It's not like I can have private security. So how else am I supposed to protect myself?
Well, first of all, we want to ask people to visit Loomered SCOTUS.com and tap on that donate tab so that they can help support Laura. We've got the government working against her. I think we all presumed we lived in a country where if somebody made a death threat against a congressional candidate, the FBI would be busy investigating that and protecting the candidate rather than doing this convoluted thing where they disallow you from exercising your Second Amendment right. Larry, how can they do that? How can they do that to Laura? She hasn't committed a crime. She hasn't been accused of a crime.
Well, she deserves to know why. I mean, the pretext may be, jumping a fence, which isn't sufficient, with Nancy Pelosi's compound or the governor of California, or chaining herself to Twitter. That's not sufficient to deny her a firearm. And to the extent that any judge issued any order, that order would have been illegal in any event. But yeah, it's something which is outrageous. But I was getting to the point as well.
Exactly what Larry's saying is correct in that, people know that I've been arrested in the past for my activism, but that's not enough to strip you of your Second Amendment right. So you have to have
be convicted of a felony.
So the misdemeanor that I got for trespassing has actually been expunged from my record because I did the life skills class in the community service. And even then, a misdemeanor is not enough. The only time a misdemeanor can be used to strip you of your Second Amendment rights is if it involves assault. And I don't have a record for assault. I don't have a felony. I've never been deemed mentally unfit by a judge. And, in order for you to be deemed mentally unfit by a judge, you have to have an actual hearing where they say you are not mentally fit to have a gun. That's never happened. So
you're also going to be examined by a psychiatrist. There's a whole process.
If she deserved to have notice of what was going on.
Right.
Yeah.
She's absolutely right with that. But let me make this other point.
An actual hearing and say that. They can't just say, because I looked into this, I thought, well, what if it's, some malicious Democrat who says, oh, they're crazy, right? They're crazy because they say that now about everyone. They say, oh, they're conspiracy theorists. Is that enough to get you, stripped of your gun rights if people just say stuff about you online? And no, they said you have to have an actual hearing or have a felony or be charged with domestic violence. And so, and then the only other way is then this NICS database is controlled by the FBI. So the FBI has to put you in the database. And so I was entered into this database shortly after I confronted James Comey in New York. And so, of course, I do believe that James Comey maliciously retweeted me when I confronted him at his book signing. And you were there with me, Jason.
Well, Laura, when we commissioned our citizens grand jury, we're indicting Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden this Thursday. You'll come on our TV show with Alan Keyes shortly thereafter. But we are in a revolutionary state. That's the point I was getting to, is that everything in terms of American body politic right now is totally controlled by the left. It's not even the radical left. The left is the same as the left, just like Islam is the same as radical Islam. It's the same thing. And they have total control over us. They want to keep us down. They're never going to relinquish power again. And it's going to take a revolution to get this country back. And I'm suggesting in my book it takes a revolution, peaceful and legal ways to do that. Laura's writing a book as well. We don't want to see violence. But as I've said many times, Jefferson predicted that particularly because of federal judges who are unaccountable to the people, unelected, that every 20 years or so, there would be a violent revolution where the blood of patriots and tyrants would have to be shed yet again. And he said, what's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty? You saw the seeds of that on January 6th, when the people rose up and said, we can't take it anymore. These federal judges and Supreme Court justices did not represent the interests of the American people, only themselves. And coupled with the rank corruption in all three branches of government, coupled with the fact that no one's been held accountable for anything in my lifetime, or yours for sure, I'm older than both of you, anybody at a high level never held accountable for anything, whether it's the Clintons, the Bidens, whether it's Mitch McConnell, whether it's whoever, because both parties protect each other and they making money hand over fist, they're acquiring power, and the Republicans are quite happy even to be number two right now because of the money they make. Just look at Karl Rove, who's become the face of Fox News. A crooked, slimy, you-know-what has become the face of Fox News and the Republican Party.
The Republican Republicans are too busy tweeting about how they're going to go buy every single Dr. Seuss collection book, and Ronna McDaniel's busy talking about how she's not watching baseball, as if we're supposed to give a shit about what she does on her weekend anyway, as if I care. You know, I mean, look, how about you actually get off your ass and go do something about cancel culture instead of just tweeting about it? Why are you even on Twitter? You know, that's what I want to know. The leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, gets banned on Twitter, and then the Republican Party and this, you know, their leadership, their so-called leadership is still going to be on Twitter. Get off Twitter.
Let me ask you this.
I mean, it's like an abusive relationship at this point in time.
Laura, let's presume you were in Congress. Hang on. Let me interject a question here, guys. Hang on. Laura, if you were in Congress when Trump was banned from Twitter, or if you were president and you were banned from Twitter as Donald Trump was for the first time ever, what action would you take as president or recommend for the president to take in that situation where Trump was banned?
First of all, I want to say that I support President Donald Trump, and I voted for President Donald Trump both times, but the biggest failure of his presidency was his failure to address big tech censorship when he had a chance. This was an issue that could have been addressed when Republicans had control of the House and the Senate and the White House, and they didn't do it. And so this isn't a new phenomenon, and it's a classic example of people thinking the crocodile is going to eat them last. And if you recall, I warned everybody that President Trump was going to be banned. You know, I confronted Dorsey in front of Congress when I still had access to all my social media. And I said that the Democrats were going to work with big tech to steal the election in 2020. And that's exactly what happened. And so Republicans need to take some responsibility for their inaction on this matter. You know, it's unfortunate. I think that, you know, this is a fair statement. Donald Trump did a lot of great things for the country, but this was a failure. And so this was definitely an issue. And I think that it's a very big mistake and a miscalculation that is now going to have drastic implications. He's now deplatformed. A lot of people are deplatformed. He was banned from Stripe, which is a fundraising platform. I got banned from Stripe last week. I just got banned from YouTube as well. But I think that a lot of Republicans are now starting to realize that, it doesn't matter if you're controversial or if you're, you know, mainstream conservative or a sitting president of the United States. You can be deplatformed because that's what
it doesn't matter. The Republican Party's dead. It's over.
Yeah, dead.
I'm starting a new party. It's called the New American Independence Party. You know, it may take some time to gather steam. We need to form a new government. We're having a conference. You're invited. Jason's going to be there as well on Memorial Day in Philadelphia to talk about what we did on July 4th, 1776, right in front of Independence Hall. Because this government doesn't represent us and the Republican Party doesn't represent us. They haven't reformed Obamacare when they had total control of government. They busted the budget. Only $2 billion so far as the result of Biden and Harris. Another $28 billion they were responsible for, as well as the Democrats. Look at the immigration. They never supported Trump on the wall, so the wall was never built. Now people are flooding across the border. The Republican Party is an absolute disgrace, and I quit. Okay, I ran as a Republican in Florida in 2003 and 2004 for the U.S. Senate. I'm embarrassed to have even done it at this point.
Well, they don't even support their own candidates. Look, for the NRCC, they raised over $200 million. And what did they do with the money? They gave 81 candidates $5,000. You do the math. What is that? That's less than $500,000. I mean, what happened to the other, $199 million that they raised? And then what about all this money that was supposed to go towards combating voter fraud? Has a single lawsuit been filed to address the voter fraud in the form of big tech social media censorship and election interference by big tech? What is the Republican Party doing? I mean, these people have more money than God, and then it's up to people like Larry Klayman and I to file lawsuits through nonprofits. I mean, do we have to really honestly ask people for donations to fund our lawsuits when the Republican Party is sitting on a war chest of hundreds of millions of dollars? I mean, what the hell are these people doing with the money besides buying designer clothes and paying their rich consultants and buying new vacation homes in the Hamptons and Martha's Vineyard?
I think there's probably a lot of cocaine and hookers there.
And that's why the
but let me just wait a minute.
Dead.
Wait a minute. Let me rephrase this question because I want to put a point on this and I want to pose it to both of you. What would President Laura Loomer or Chief of Staff Laura Loomer have done in 2020 when Trump was banned? And further, Larry, what would she legally have been able to do?
Well, let me answer that first, Laura.
I'll tell you what I would have done, and this is something that needs to be done. Nancy Pelosi is constantly saying nobody's above the law. Well, you have Jack Dorsey, Sundar Pichai, you have Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg, who committed perjury when they lied to Congress under oath that they don't censor conservatives, that they're not implementing algorithms to censor people and influence the elections. If I were to lie to Congress, or any other American citizen were to lie to Congress, they would be in jail. It's called committing perjury, and it's punishable by prison time. So I say lock them up, because I agree with Nancy Pelosi. Nobody is above the law. So why don't we start enforcing the laws on the books? Also, another thing, it is illegal in the United States of America to aid and abet terrorist organizations that are designated as such by the United States government and our State Department. The United States government recognizes ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah, and in other parts of the world, Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Okay, why is it that these companies are getting away with providing platform access for the sake of recruitment and fundraising and the spread of propaganda? Okay, they need to be charged with aiding and abetting terrorist organizations. They need to be charged with treason. Okay, their executives need to be jailed for committing perjury. We don't even necessarily need to create new laws on the books. Why don't we just start enforcing them?
Well, you're right, and this is what I was going to say, is that
you don't just get to.
I supported Donald Trump too. I was in effect at Freedom Watch, his law firm, although he never recognized that because he was getting advice from some people that I've had to sue for Dr. Corsi. We won't mention that here. But if there was a fault of the president, is that he never took control of his Justice Department. He got dragged along. As head of the executive branch, he is the head of the Justice Department. He could have ordered the Justice Department to actually start meaningful lawsuits against big tech to break them up. Why did it fall to Laura and I to have to do it, as she said? Bill Barr, the complete disgrace that he is as an establishment Republican hack, the former Attorney General, filed an antitrust case. It was a meaningless antitrust case, very weak at the end of his term in office. You can bet that went into the circular file, the trash, were ready by Biden and Harris and their Justice Department. One good example of the Justice Department under Biden and Harris, which will be 100 times worse than under anybody else, is that Hunter Biden, who's getting indicted on Thursday along with his father and his uncle, just wrote a book. Now, why did he write a book where he makes all these revelations that he was even snorting Parmesan cheese on the floor because he was so he was so cracked up that he thought it was crack. He needed some. Okay, why did he admit now that in effect that the laptop was his with all the emails? Because he knows he'll never be prosecuted.
Could be yours, Larry.
Controls.
Could be Laura's.
I'm not allowed to have a gun, even though I, didn't lie on my concealed carry application, even though I'm not a criminal. But Hunter Biden,
this crackhead is throwing guns in dumpsters.
Just lying about utilizing or having drugs. Okay, felony possession of drugs. It is illegal in this country to have and possess crack, cocaine, crack. Okay, he was snorting and smoking crack and Parmesan cheese and all other types of white substances, as he just outlined in his book.
What a lowlife!
What a
lowlife scumbag. He was also doing his dead brother's wife. Okay, that's a great one. He impregnated some woman and says he doesn't remember even knowing her. I mean, this is the guy who the president of the United States says is the smartest person he's ever met. Well, he was smart.
Oh, my God.
Because he laundered hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into the coffers of the Biden family accounts. Okay, real smart. Okay.
He said that about the other man that was smoking crack, too, our first Muslim president, Barack Hussein Obama. So everybody that Joe Biden thinks is a smart man is a crack smoker. Imagine that.
Now, wait a minute. We've got a slight correction.
I'm not making
Parmesan
that up
cheese.
He admits that in his
smoked,
memoir, too.
Not
all
snorted.
these men
Yes.
that we're supposed to admire for some reason, Barack, Hunter,
They're crackheads.
they all talk about smoking crack.
It's not good. Crack kills, Laura. We got to stay away from it. But just a small correction. The Parmesan cheese, I believe, was free-based, not snorted. So I was trying to get the full...
But the point I was making is, why does somebody write a book where he's getting $4 million up front, okay, and admitting to crimes, if you have a Justice Department that's actually going to bring about justice? He knows he's untouchable. Our country has the most corrupt justice system of any major country. Face up to it. It's corrupt to the core. The legal profession is the most corrupt profession in this country. The District of Columbia Bar is a complete bunch of leftist hacks. And they are an example. These leftist publications, these law publications, they're a bunch of hacks as well. The country is in total denial. Okay, those conservatives and people of faith and others of the left taking total control, and they better snap out of it. Even conservative websites like WorldNet Daily are now censoring stuff I wrote for them for over 20 years. They're afraid of retaliation. They're cowards. They put their heads in the sand.
Yeah, and then it's like this. I'm so tired of the sob story with the Biden family. Oh, my son with a brain tumor. My son had a brain tumor, and then Hunter Biden blaming his drug issues on the fact that his mom died in a car accident, the sister, and it's like there's a lot of people in the world that have adversity, and they don't all turn into degenerate crack whores like Hunter Biden. There's a lot of people in the world that have adversity.
He's more of a crack John than a crack
whores.
whore. Yeah, he's kind of a crack John.
Well, and the point is, these
but
are
wait a
people
minute.
now who are in control of this country.
And I want to bring you back to the initial topic, guys. So what happens now?
Just like your book, Larry, Whores, you were spot on.
It takes a revolution, forget the scandalous. Remember what Mark
But wait a
Twain
minute.
said?
The sequel
Let me take
to
you
your
guys-
book, Whores, should be crack.
What's the difference between whores and lawyers? You get something to value from a whore.
Right. But I just
Wait
gave
a
you the
minute.
sequel to the book.
Yes. And so let me just take you guys back to the top of the conversation, because what happens now that the Supreme Court has said, nah? Is there anything that can be done, or that's it?
Well, Thomas, set the framework for what should happen, but unfortunately, he is a minority on the Supreme Court in more ways than one. Okay, and he's to be commended for at least telling the truth. But even he, lacked the courage to go the full distance here. Although I think he probably fought for Laura in my case. I believe he did. But he's up against a lot of forces there. And it's untenable. And that's why we do need to form a new government. We need federal judges who are elected, not appointed with campaign contributions, perks, and sometimes out-and-out bribes. They're the yes men, no less than the judges on the Court of St. James.
Yeah,
King
even
George
the Federalist Society too. I mean, no more of these Federalist Society judges. They're awful. I don't know what Larry has to say about that, but the Federalist Society shouldn't be picking and choosing who our judges are, and I think that a lot of these judges who we defended, so fiercely from the attacks of people like Kamala Harris and others have been just total disappointment.
Let's tell the story of Roy Altman, a Trump judge, federal judge in Palm Beach, a case that I filed for Laura, the guy winds up dismissing it before the other side even answers the complaint. Okay, she has an ethics complaint pending against him with the Judicial Council. Did they ever respond, Laura?
No.
No,
And
of course
it's a
not.
serious case too, pertaining Facebook saying that it was okay for people to murder me. And so, these cases right now that were, and I know like the look on Jason's face, because these cases never get reported in the media, and then judges just get to decide. They don't want the controversy in their court. So I'm sorry, just because I'm famous and controversial doesn't mean that I'm not entitled to my day in court.
We got to get rid of these judges, Larry. This is the biggest problem.
Rod doesn't mean that they're not entitled to their day in court. I mean, did O.J. Simpson and his wife's family, did they get their day in court? It just seems like if you're a conservative in this country and you're high profile, you're denied your due process. And I think that Larry would agree to that, right, Larry? You've seen this with other cases.
Yeah, they run away from it because how do these judges get to be judges? Because they're not controversial, they're establishment. They have to scratch the backs of those that get them their post, that recommend them, campaign contributions, big law firm contributions, know the right people. But you also don't want to offend the opposite party either because they can block you. So they're unwilling to take strong stands, and they're worthless. And I write about it in my book, It Takes a Revolution. Forget the scandal industry. I'm sending a copy to President Trump tomorrow. I want him to read it because I want him to see, you can get it, by the way, at Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. Buy it at Barnes & Noble, not Amazon. But I want him to read who he appointed because, yes, he was deceived. He was defrauded by the Federalist Society. He was defrauded by Mitch McConnell. He was defrauded by Don McGahn in the White House, who testified 12 hours behind his back, breaking executive privilege, implicating him in potential crimes. He doesn't know who he appointed. He thinks they were great. Well, I guess he doesn't think that anymore because they stabbed him in the back. including his vice president, who stabbed him in the back,
That's right.
like Brutus in the Roman Senate.
Unbelievable.
That's super
So-
yeah, look, this is a huge problem, but we saw it with President Trump too. He was denied his due process, and it's just because of who he is. And if you are an outspoken conservative, or you have, a high-profile attorney who's well-known, who happens to be conservative too, they come after you. Look what they just did to Larry, right? Look what they did to David Schoen. Look what they do to a lot of these attorneys who, take a stand. And Larry knows too. It's really, people will say to me all the time, oh, well, I'm sure you could easily find attorneys, right, to take your case pro bono.
No.
Oh, I'm sure you could easily find cases or attorneys that want to take these cases on. Well, Larry's one of the only attorneys that would take my case, because a lot of these other attorneys were too scared to take on Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Apple, because their law firms actually threatened to fire them.
Wow.
Well, and that happened with Trump too, because remember, he started off in the impeachment with all these big law firms, and they all quit because they were scared they were going to lose clients. Same thing that's happening with Coke and Delta and everything else with the All-Star Game. Lawyers are the most despicable people, frankly, on earth, which is why Shakespeare said, let's kill all the lawyers. I mean that figuratively. I'm not suggesting go out and kill a lawyer. But They protect themselves before they protect their clients. There are very few lawyers that put themselves in front of their clients. There's an old expression, never go to jail with your client, and that's true. Unless your client has millions of dollars that's willing to pay you. But if you're not paid much, if you're not being paid millions of dollars, forget it. They'll throw you under the bus in a second.
And I hate to even bring this up, Larry, but I'm going to bring it up just because, I have to say there's no such thing as a coincidence. When Donald Trump drafted or was threatening to take executive action against the social media companies, and our case was awaiting to be heard in the DC circuit, we were originally scheduled to have an oral argument, and our oral argument was canceled because of COVID. We were supposed to have oral arguments in February, then they got postponed to April. Then on May 27th, when Trump threatened to take action, the same exact day, the DC circuit, basically they dismissed our case. And so that was retaliatory. Then the same week, right, they have some ethics complaints, right, against Larry. And Larry, you can go into this as well, but I view it as a form of targeting. And then they do the same thing the same week, the week before the Supreme Court comes out and says, oh yeah, well, we're going to deny to hear this case. Larry's in the news again. And so they do this at the same exact time as a form of retaliation, as a sign to basically tell you to back off, right? It's like, back off, or else we're going to come after your legal license or your ability to practice law. Or, you can expand on this too, Larry, if you want to feel like they're targeting.
What does it mean anymore? That's why the American people need to take their legal system back. You file all these cases, you get in front of these hack judges, so what does it matter whether you can practice law or not?
But what they do to you too, in terms of targeting you and trying to, they try to suspend you. I think that there's something in the timing, because if you recall, right, this just happened a week before they denied our case, and last time when they first tried to do this, it was when our case was dismissed in the DC circuit. So they always try to do that to try to discredit the credibility of our case.
Well, and it came about also when they thought that Biden was going to be elected president, because they knew I would be the strongest advocate against him in the legal profession. But they've done it also. Kellyanne Conway got a bar complaint by 16 leftist law professors, even Bill Barr, who did nothing to them. They're seeking to disbar him. Every president of the D.C. bar filed a complaint against him. Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, many conservatives, they try to eliminate them because they don't want us to have the right to challenge them in court. It's part of the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's why they strategically picked that time to release these news stories, even though they've been sitting on it, is because they want to try to discredit our cases. And that's why, it's dehumanizing. They smear you, and then they ignore you, and they act like you don't exist. And so no one in conservative media contacted us. This story was the #1 trending story on Twitter yesterday with regards to Justice Thomas's statement. And the statement was not regarding the case involving President Trump. It was in relation to that case in response to our case. And so, we are treated like we do not exist, and we are dehumanized as conservatives, and what has happened to us will happen to others.
I talk about that in my book. The subtitle is as important as the title. The title is It Takes a Revolution forget the scandal industry. But you won't see Laura on Fox News. You won't see me on Fox News. You won't see Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Klayman Bundy and the Bundy family. You won't see Jerry Corsi. You won't see all the people that actually do something. You just have a bunch of people that go on, with nice cleavages or whatever the case may be, and don't know anything.
Yeah, they call it Fox Nation. I call it Bimbo Nation because that's what it is. It's like an absolute bimbo eruption. I mean, you have these women and they do it all the time. Oh, look, we're putting so-and-so on TV. Look at them. Look how great their legs look in this nice short dress and these heels and makeup. I mean, that's what you get when you watch Fox News. You're not exactly getting,
No, there's a lot of My Pillow ads there too. There's a lot of ads.
You getting what?
Look what they did.
They
threw Trump under the bus too. Well, so they used Trump to promote all their books, and then when they throw Trump under the bus, they censor Jeanine Pirro. Okay, they try to fire her because she talks about Ilhan Omar's hijab. Okay, and look what they do. Look how awful Fox News.
Well, let me ask you about this. Let me ask you guys about this.
The head of Fox News, Lachlan Murdoch, has now fled the country for Australia.
Unbelievable. But let me ask you about this, because it seems that one of the specialties is like personally crafting a punishment directed right at that person. Like in my case, they're constantly attacking the YouTube channel because they know that that's my primary platform, my primary source. Laura, you just had an incident with YouTube where they've locked your video into private mode or something like that. I've never even heard of that happening before.
Right, so they create new policies pretty much in response to me. And I just got back from Tallahassee where I was advising lawmakers on the amendments to make to Governor DeSantis's proposed big tech legislation because it's proposed legislation, but it's faulty legislation. And I identified some loopholes. And some of the loopholes that I identified were regarding payment processors and online payment platforms, and also the App Store, which is controlled by Google. And of course, Google controls YouTube. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that the same exact day that I gave my speech, I get banned from Stripe moments after. And then a couple of days later, YouTube decides to pretty much, oh, we're not banning you, because I haven't posted anything on YouTube, right? I don't post on my YouTube channel anymore besides my campaign ads. So they can't really say I'm in violation because, obviously I'm not doing anything. So they flagged a 3-year-old video about a terrorist attack that I did. Okay. And they said that it was violent and graphic content. Well, yeah, of course it's pertaining to a violent subject, but it doesn't mean that I'm promoting violence. It's called reporting on the news. Is that illegal now? Are we not allowed to report on the news or any violent activity anymore because it's violent and the people who are perpetuating the crimes are not white, right? Are we not allowed to highlight crimes and acts of terrorism committed by non-whites anymore? And so the video was titled, the left, why does the left blame white people for everything? And then they just decided to shut down my entire YouTube channel for it by saying, we're not banning you, but we're making all your videos private. Well, it's the same exact thing, right? Because if all my videos are private and you can't see my videos anymore, well, then what's the point?
But some of the videos still seem to be there, Laura. The channel seems to be somewhat intact, no?
Who knows? But you see the photo there for yourself, and
I saw the message. Yeah.
So I don't know when it all takes effect, or if you click the video, if it's even going to play.
The point that I'm getting at is, as you started, you said you're not posting daily on YouTube, so they know that if they take down your YouTube channel, it doesn't really do that much to you. But in my case,
it was 5 months ago because I don't get. I mean, look at my videos. I have 100,000 subscribers and I get 9,000 views. It's ridiculous, So they take away my subscribers. They take away my view count. They make it look like I have no support. They delete likes. They delete comments. And so I just don't post on YouTube anymore because it's not worth it.
Well, but what I'm getting at is I think they know that their standard punishment of disallowing you from live streaming for a week would have no effect. So they needed to come up with something new. I've gotten all kinds of strikes and all kinds of attacks. I've never heard of this violent content thing and automatically putting things on private.
It's new. It's a new policy that they're creating. And then of course they do it right when I file to run for Congress again, which I have, and they do it when I'm speaking to lawmakers, and people are talking about this. And of course, right as my book's about to come out, because they don't want me being able to talk about my book. So it's election interference. I can't get my campaign ads up. I can't post my ads on Facebook and Twitter. I can't post them on YouTube. I can't raise money on Stripe, which is the processor used through WinRed, the official payments platform and fundraising platform for the Republican Party and the NRCC and NSCC. Okay, so it's all strategic. It's a way to erase me and to damage my candidacy. And of course, these do-nothing idiot Republicans and the GOP leadership are sitting back and letting it happen.
Yeah. Well, and it's worse than all that, Laura, because it really is an effort to deny you access to a livelihood and money and essentially to kill you. Now, we've seen that the FBI doesn't care about outright death threats. Larry, I mean, isn't this, at what point is denying someone access to money an attack on their life? What about, I mean, we're not going to be able to get anybody to bring any charges. It's really
no, we have no justice system, absolutely none, and that's what I'm saying. You know, I many years ago, 27 years ago, I decided that if I didn't use my legal license to do good, to try to change things, that I'd rather flip hamburgers at McDonald's, really. I mean, I saw it. And that's where the name Judicial Watch came from. I saw the corruption on the bench. And frankly, when I was in the Justice Department, this is my second book, Whores, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. I saw politics that protected people that were on the right side of the fence, and those that weren't, they got prosecuted. It disgusted me. And that's why I started Judicial Watch. It's why I later ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida. You know, I'm really not suited to work from the inside. I'm better from the outside. So I started Freedom Watch after I didn't win that contest. And I've been doing this ever since. But right now, to go into court, I'll be candid. I'm not going to pound my chest like my former colleagues at Judicial Watch, crowing about how many documents they got that you can hang on the wall. That's about all they're good for. The fact is that the justice system doesn't work, and justice does not reside in the courts. It doesn't. So we have to form our own justice system, which is why I'm undertaking citizens' grand juries. We have the right to indict. We have the right to try. We have the right to seek convictions. We have the right to sentence. And we even have the right for citizens' arrest, which we'll attempt to do peacefully and legally, as I write in my book. It takes a revolution. We need to take our justice system back and create our own, just like our founding fathers did when the king took it away from us.
Yeah, and I want to take a minute just to remind everybody that they can see the first two installments of the Citizens Grand Juries where the Bidens are about to be indicted by going to freedomwatchusa.org. We've got 2 episodes up there right now. The third will be happening this Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's time-consuming and expensive for Larry and his team to put these together. I've been involved firsthand on this one, so I do want to encourage people to visit Freedom Watch USA. Click on the donate button. Donations over $50 are going to get you a free copy of Larry's book, Forget the Scandal Industry, It Takes a Revolution, and of course you're going to help Freedom Watch carry on its fight. I really also want to encourage people to visit Loomer.com. It's so important that we support Laura right now. I mean, you know, Laura, every single time you come on the show, I'm reminded of just how dialed in you are, how smart you are, how on top of all this stuff you are. So many people send me messages about how beautiful and attractive you are, but I think that your brains and your tenacity are really, I mean, you know, you're so impressive on every level, Laura. It's just always eye-opening to have you on the show. And now with this latest round of attacks against Laura, it's really important that people visit Loomer.com, go to the donate page. Laura, what's the best way for people to help fund your operation now that all these payment processors are shutting down?
People can go online and they can make donations online. They're tax-deductible contributions, and then they can also contribute with Bitcoin. And, you know, there's going to be more litigation as well. There's constant litigation. And I think that what I was talking about with Larry yesterday is that we planted a seed. You know, we planted a seed that is soon going to be watered and blossom into a beautiful tree of liberty, and it really opened people's eyes. And so well, you're not going to win every battle. We're going to win the war. And that's what happened. Our case may have been denied in front of the Supreme Court, but not many people can say that a Supreme Court justice utilized their case to basically make the argument, hello, Supreme Court, eventually we're going to have to, actually address this because this is pretty egregious. And so that's what happened. I take it as a win. And I think that it's a good first step. And it also is going to hopefully change these kind of old and tried traditional conservatives who think, oh, well, we live in a free market society. Don't worry. We have entrepreneurship and the free market's going to handle this. Well, we don't live in a free market society anymore. That's the reality. We don't have free speech. We don't have free elections, and we certainly don't have a free market anymore. And as I like to say, the free market is now a Google board meeting. And so when we get antitrust laws, maybe we actually will return to having a free market in this country. But until then, conservatives need to kind of separate themselves from these ideas. And it's very laughable, right, to see the left and the Democrat Party become the defenders of so-called private property rights, and the left screaming, convulsing, and hyperventilating over government's regulation. I mean, wasn't it just the Democrats last week that were having tech hearings calling on big tech to do exactly that, and the government to do just that, to draft hate speech policies to regulate people's speech even more? I mean, the Democrats are all about regulating social media, just not when it comes to protecting the civil rights of conservatives.
Well, Laura hit the nail on the head. They are National Socialists. We're living in the Fourth Reich. That's what we are right now. We are. And it's going to get worse.
I want to let people know that they can point their smartphones right at the screen right now, or if you're watching on a smartphone, fire up your laptop, watch this there, and point your smartphone at this QR code. You can donate to Laura's Bitcoin account just by using that, and you can go to loomer.com or scan the barcode right here.
They can also send checks at the end as well. And then I also, like Larry, I have a book that's coming out called Loomer, How I Became the Most Loved Woman in the World. And it's online right now, available for pre-order. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. I think it's funny. It's available on Amazon. I'm sure they'll eventually ban it. Who knows? It's interesting for the time being, right? What do they say? All good things come to an end.
Great cover.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'll sell it for you too, Laura, on Freedom Watch's website. So
when it comes out, I appreciate it. And then, like I said, the book is available for pre-order. It's coming out on October 5th. And then I will have copies of my book available for purchase on my website in October when it comes out. But if you want to pre-order it now, you can. And I will have signed copies available too when it comes out.
That's great. Are you going to do a book signing, and we can invite James Comey?
There are very few in the conservative movement today that have the guts of this publisher. We have to thank them, Post Hill.
Post Hill.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm really excited for that book. Laura, will there be an audible version for people like me who take a million years to read 2 pages?
Yeah, there will be an audiobook too. I'm going to be making an audiobook.
Because I'll be listening to that in my car as I'm driving all around the country, scoping out the different cities that are being destroyed under the same Democrats that want to destroy your reputation, destroy our access to the Second Amendment, destroy our access to the First Amendment. It's funny, when Crowdsource the Truth started, and you guys were very early guests, we used to always talk and speculate about how these things might happen. Laura, you have proven to be absolutely the canary in the coal mine, and the things that have happened to you have slowly trickled down to other people, including the President of the United States. And I'm sorry to say, I think your prediction, as fearful or frightening rather as it is, it seems accurate. And what has happened to Laura is likely to happen to each of us. So I really do encourage Crowdsource the Truth viewers to visit freedomwatchusa.org and loomer.com and support both of those organizations. What you guys are doing is incredibly important.
And we thank you, Jason, because you allow us to tell the truth. And that's really important. That's why it's called Crowdsource the Truth. Support Crowdsource. You're my very good friend. You're my colleague. You both are. And I cherish your relationship, our relationship, because there are very few people like you in this world.
Thank you, Larry. It's kind of you to say. And I feel the same about both of you. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. Laura, we're going to stay on top of this. People are going to vote for you in 2022. People might even want to consider moving to Florida to do that. And I want to thank you both for a great episode tonight. I want to thank everybody for watching. Have a great night.